Hi everyone, Britt Simon here. I'm happy to bring you some information about the new I-134 form. It's the publication date of this form is 12/24, December 24. I think it's December 12th, 24. This form is going to be used from March 13th, 2025 onwards. If you're seeing this video before that date, you can continue to use the old form until March the 13th, or you can just switch immediately to this new form. And I have to say, the new form is simpler and easier to fill out than the old form. So why wouldn't you use the new form? I'm quite pleased to see the changes they've made to the form. But anyway, this video will explain how to fill out the form. I think it's fairly self-explanatory, fairly simple, easier than the old form. It's a good improvement. So let me just explain that to you, and we'll take it from there. Okay. Now, first of all, where do you get the form? You can download the form from the USCIS website. If you just Google the word I-134, you'll find the form. Okay. And this form is only to be used as an affidavit of support of certain types of cases. It's not used in family-based or employment-based cases, etc. It is used in the diversity visa lottery. I think it's also used in K1s and a couple of other scenarios. But basically, you should be sure whether you need to fill in this form or whether you actually need to fill in the I-864. For DV lottery applicants, you can only fill in this form. The 864 is not useful. Okay, so let's go through let's go through the form. First of all, who fills out this form? Well, the first question here is, I am filing this form on behalf of myself as a beneficiary or another individual who is the beneficiary. So in the case of DV lottery, which is the scenario I'll speak to you about, you would be asking a US citizen or permanent resident in the USA to fill out the form on your behalf as a DV lottery selectee. And the single form will cover yourself and all of your family members, okay? And I'll talk about the formula used to calculate how much money the sponsor should have. But I'll explain all of that in a few minutes. The other thing I wanted to explain about the form is that they've made it very clear, both in the instructions and in the guidance for consular officers, etc., and in the form itself, that this form is not legally binding. It cannot be used by the government to sue the sponsor for your expenses should you require any sort of expenses or support from the government. It cannot be used in that way, unlike the I-864. So that's an important distinction, and probably something that you and your sponsor should discuss, or they should be aware of, because they are not responsible for any legal ramifications of this. It's a promise, but it's not a legally enforceable promise. Okay, so in most cases, you're going to click, or the sponsor is going to click the second box or mark that with an X. By the way, it does say to type or print in black ink, so no need to ask me that question. Then information about the individual agreeing to financially support the beneficiary, the financial sponsor. Okay, this is not the same as a sponsor of the case. It's a financial sponsor of the beneficiary. That's all. So family name, last name, sometimes called surname, and then the given names and middle names, right? So this would be Elvis Presley would be Presley, and then in here Elvis. And I think Elvis's middle name, forgot what it was, but the middle name would be here, right? Other names used. So any other names that you have used. If, for example, you have changed your name through marriage, then you would show your maiden name here, right? Your current mailing address, very simple, put your current mailing address, no problem at all there. If your current mailing address is not the same as your current physical address, then they're going to want your physical address as well, okay? And you can put that in that section. your date of birth, okay, your place of birth, your city or town, your place of province and country, etc. And if you're an immigrant yourself, you may have an A number or a USCIS online account number. Fill those numbers in here, okay? If you're a citizen, you won't have those, okay? What's your current immigration status? US citizen, US national, lawful permanent resident, and so on. You should not be filling this form out as a non-immigrant, in my opinion, because that just brings up questions of when you're going to be legally entitled to stay in the United States, and your support for the person you're sponsoring is limited in that way because you're not a lawful permanent resident. So in my opinion, and you're free to disagree with this, but in my opinion, I would only have an I-134 filled out by a financial sponsor who is a US citizen or a lawful permanent resident. There are some others, asylee, refugees, etc. But until you've got LPR status or US citizen status, I wouldn't advise filling in this form. What is your relationship to the beneficiary? It could be brother, brother-in-law, sister, sister-in-law, cousin. It could be friend, friend of a friend even. But in that case, I would just say friend, right? So you put in your relationship. Very simple. Your employment status. Are you employed? Are you self-employed? Put in your employment status there. It's very simple form, actually. So glad to see this form. Okay. In part 2, in the financial information, it asks firstly, have you ever filled out another I-134 or I-864 and the various variations of those forms? Have you, how many other forms have you filled out, right? And so you need, and your support obligation is not ended. You need to understand that if you've got an existing commitment, particularly on the I-864, to support some other immigrant, there's a period of time when that will continue, and you need to make sure that that period of time has ended before you start another promise on the I-834. Sorry, on the I-134, I should say. All right, so complete that information if you need to, but preferably it would be better for a sponsor to not be in the position where they have existing I-134s or 864s out there. Then there's a question about how many dependents do you support, including yourself? Okay, so if you are, a family of 5, mum, dad, 3 kids, then 5 would be the number you would insert in here. Okay, and you can write it as FIVE, or you can write that in just as the number. Either way, doesn't make any difference. Okay, it says very clearly, do not include individuals in item number 13. People that you sponsored before, right? And do not include the beneficiary named in part 3. Okay, this is just about you, all right? And then you're asked to list your dependents, okay? List them all down here, their full name, date of birth, relationship, and so on. And then we get into the financial status questions, your current annual income. Now, this form is going to be evaluated against the federal poverty guidelines. And essentially what they're going to do is they're going to take your family size and the beneficiary's family size and add those 2 family sizes together to say, okay, you've got a family of 5 and you're sponsoring someone who's a mum, dad, and 2 kids. That's 4 people in that family. And so your combined family that you need to have income to support is a family of 9. Okay. Now, I mention that because before you fill in this form, you may as well realize what the federal poverty guidelines are for your family size, the combined family size. So if we put in here federal poverty guidelines, and you can check this at any time, it changes year to year, but you can check this. So let me get the form here. This is the FPG. So in the example I gave, where it was a combined family of 9, you would look in this table here, you'd see it goes up to 8, 54,150. And for families or households with more than 8 persons, add 5,500 for each additional person. So 5,500 would be added onto that, meaning 59,650. Okay. That would need to be your annual salary. If you don't earn more than that, then, or if you earn less than that, then frankly you should not be filling in this form. And to be honest with you, these are the FPGs, the federal poverty guidelines. If you have a family of 3 and you've got an income of 26,000, you're not really in a position to be a financial supporter. If it's less than that, right? You're just making it yourself. You don't have the additional income to support someone else, right? So it's kind of you to want to do this, but I would suggest don't do it if your income is not at the FPG level and then some. Okay. All right. So what is your current annual income? Enter that here. If you have income and let's say bonus, you can use last year's income as as a guideline for how much you earn. Okay, it doesn't need to be precise, but you are going to need to provide some information. So along with this form, you're going to have to submit last year's tax return, up-to-date pay slips or pay stubs that show how much you've earned year to date. Maybe a 1099 if you're self-employed, or a 1040 tax report form, and of course your photo ID proving who you are. Okay. Now in section 17, there is a box where you can fill in assets. There's a catch with assets, or a couple of catches. First of all, assets are not evaluated in the same way as income. Income is more powerful. It's about 5 times more powerful as far as this form is concerned. So if you have a $100,000 asset, it's really only worth $20,000 of income. That's the ratio that they take that into account, right? And so assets are not very valuable for this form. It's more about the income. The other problem with assets is, let's say you own your house and you know that you have a $500,000 house with a $300,000 mortgage. Then in theory, you've got a $200,000 net asset there, right? You've got that net asset. However, if you put that asset on this form, you're going to have to provide documentation to show the amount of mortgage you've got and the assessed value of your house. Okay, so you'd have to have an assessor come around, and frankly, it's just not worth it for that 1/5 calculation. So again, base it on assets, immediately available assets. If, on the other hand, you have, let's say, a bank account that has, $70,000 in that bank account, then you can put that sort of asset here because it's a liquid asset and it's immediately available. But what you're saying here is that that money would be available to support the person you're proposing to support. And so, it's okay to do that, but it's far better to just rely on the income. So my advice is, generally speaking, don't get into the assets box unless you really feel you have to. Okay. Okay. Information, intend to provide specific contributions to the beneficiary. Really helpful. This version of the form is really helpful. The questions are a little bit more clear than they used to be. So question number 18 says, in addition to providing financial support, okay, I intend to make specific contributions to cover the beneficiary's basic living needs, right? Well, you can say yes or no to that. And the specific contributions are described down here, right? So it could be, for example, that you are providing room and board. That's a place for the immigrant to live, the beneficiary to live. And room and board means the room where they're going to live, and board meaning meals, etc. Are you doing that? So are you providing some specific and additional help above actual financial support? That's what this box is for. So you would say yes or no to that question. If you feel you want to detail something, you don't have to, but if you feel you want to detail something, that's where you would do it. So you would select yes, and then you would describe what the additional specific contribution would be. Okay, and again, it shows here enrolling in school, enrolling in any benefits for which they're eligible. In other words, you're providing your skills and expertise to help them get set up. That's kind of useful if you are prepared to do it. Okay. Information about the beneficiary now in part 3. Now, this has got beneficiary's current legal name. Do not provide the nickname, so it should be their legal name as shown in their DS-260. Other names used, again, the DS-260 should have these other names. So you can put that in there as well. The beneficiary's date of birth, right? Their gender, male or female. Another gender identity. That's interesting. This form was before the government changed their rules about that sort of question or that sort of response. So use male or female. Don't go into another gender identity at the moment because the government have got their knickers in a twist about that. So alien registration number, if any, they won't have one because they haven't been through the process yet. And then the beneficiary's place of birth, the city or town, state or province, and country. Okay, fill that in. Country of citizenship or nationality. You should know all of that. Again, this is this is about someone that you are prepared to financially support to allow them to emigrate to the USA. You're supposed to know some basic information about that person. It is supposed to be a friend or a relative. And there should be a relationship between you. So you should be able to just answer all of those questions. But certainly check with the beneficiary. If you're not sure, for example, their place of birth, check with them before you write that down. Okay. Then other information about the beneficiary. They want to know the marital status of the beneficiary. Be careful with that. Make sure it is accurate, right? You may know that person to be single now, but were they previously married, therefore divorced? Okay. Check with the beneficiary and make sure that you absolutely know. Okay. Beneficiary's current mailing address, that's their mailing address in the country where they live now. You put all of that information in there. And again, another question about is the mailing address the same as the current physical address? And if not, there's another space where you can put the physical address. Okay, same as before. The beneficiary's anticipated period of stay is pretty easy. Just pick a date slightly in the future. Let's say you're in March now and you know that the beneficiary has an interview in, let's say, April. Let's just assume they're going to emigrate on July the 1st. You put in 7/1, and notice the date format, by the way. Put in 7/1/2025. Okay, and then the anticipated period of stay, because this is a permanent period of stay, you would put no end date. You would select the choice for no end date. Okay, so choose kind of a random date. The first. Just before I go on to that, let me just address something. The old 134 had places to list every single beneficiary derivative, meaning the beneficiary in this case that you're sponsoring, if it's a DV lottery case, this would be, you would have given information about the principal winner. Okay. And then they have family members, perhaps they have a spouse and they have children. Those are their derivatives. In the old version of the form, you had to detail all of the derivatives. And also there was a place where the income of the beneficiary was needed to be in there. And it was a lot more complex, and it was overly complex, frankly. And so I'm glad they've done away with all of that. But there is no question now for the number of derivatives that the beneficiary has, which is fine. It's not a mistake in the form. You don't need to worry about the children. It is quite obvious to the consular officer how many people need to be added and taken care of by this form. they don't need to see those details on this form in order to take those people into account. So I'm glad they've made this change. It's made the form a lot easier to fill out. Please don't worry about it. I've had lots of people very worried, apparently, that there is no place to put the derivative children for the beneficiary. It's not necessary. It's a question that's no longer required. Okay, so nothing particularly exciting about that. Then you've got the statement of the individual agreeing to financially support the beneficiary. Similar sort of questions here than we just covered. Again, they want to know, can you understand English? Or did an interpreter help you? Did someone prepare the form for you? And in the case of an interpreter or a preparer, there's going to be another section, part 6 and part 7, that you'll need to fill out if you choose those options, right? Again, your contact number now, the mobile phone number, and the email address, if any. Okay. You're going to sign that. There's the signature and the date of the signature. It does explain, let's see, to assure the US government that the person named in Part 3 will be financially supported while in the USA. So that's basically the reason you're filling in this form, is you're agreeing to support that person financially, but it's not a legal obligation. Okay. All right. Then if you had chosen in either case a translator or a preparer, then part 6 and part 7 are for that information. Okay, so for a lot of you, you won't be filling in part 6 and part 7. And then part 8 is for additional information. This is simply where you can add the basic information here for for the form, and then add additional information. If, for example, you have more derivative children than you had space to list, you would add those additional derivative names, your people that you support. You would put those people there that are financially dependent on you, only if you ran out of space in the other questions. Okay, so there's a little bit of an extra space to fill out extra information if anything else needs to be noted. But if you're taking my advice and not listing a bunch of assets and it's only really about your income, then and as long as you don't have many many people dependent on you financially, then you're not going to need this last section of the form. And that's it. 10 pages, much easier than before. And several of those pages are just signature pages anyway. So this is much easier than before. I applaud the government for making this form so much easier. I hope it stays this way. It's designed to expire or be reviewed, in other words, at the end of December in 2027. So hopefully this form will be around for a few years and is, as I say, a lot easier and simpler than the old form. Okay. I hope that was helpful. I hope that's helped you on how to fill out that form. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask me. My blog, by the way, is britsimonsays.com. And I take questions there and I answer questions at that blog. So if you have any questions, that would be the best place to ask those questions. All right, everybody. Thanks then. Bye-bye.